What up, guys? It's your boy Dre B Rambo. I'm here for a reaction video. I found a video called Why Men Have No Real Friends. This is from the Diary of a CEO. And I watched about the first 3 minutes and I thought it was kind of interesting. Um, so most of it I'm going to be watching for the first time. And for the shits and giggles, I'm going to comment on it. I finally figured out how to use share screen, which let's see if I could show you guys here. I guess if I click that.
I've made.
Oh, not doing it. Here we go. So this is Diary of a CEO. I don't actually know his name, but I've seen the show before. It's an interesting show and it's very popular. Anyhow, I think he's interviewing a guy named Richard Reeves, and they're going to be talking about why men have no real friends. I don't know. I have no doubt in my mind that's true for a lot of dudes. I have a lot of friends. Uh, I have a very few really close friends. And there's a reason for that. And I'm going to share that. First, I just want to see how we can get this started with this reaction video and just check it out.
0 new friends in London in 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
My friends are my colleagues and my friends that I've had for 10 years. That is it. I don't make new friends. And this is something that I have echoed to me a lot when I meet men out and about, when I do talks and stuff and they come up to me after. I've had men whisper to me, how do I make friends where I'm lonely? And when they do it, they come really, really close so that the person behind them in the queue can't hear them say it.
I've had exactly the same experience.
And they whisper it about how do I make friends where I'm feeling lonely or something like that. And I've heard in your work, the work that was in your book.
Wow, that's really something. To be a grown man and not know how to make friends. But I assume if you don't know how or where to go, especially where to be, you might not be able to make those friends. That's gotta suck. I've definitely been in that situation when I was a young guy. Didn't have a whole lot of friends, spent a lot of time to myself. But there's a lot of reasons for that. But let's see what these guys say.
I think on page 45, you say that there is a male friendship recession. What did you mean when you said that?
We're seeing a decline in friendships generally, but it's much more acute for men. So in the US, 15% of men under the age of 30 say they don't have a single close friend. That's up from 3% in 1990. And so that's almost 1 in 7 men. You're seeing declining number of men saying how much time they spend with friends, shrinking social networks, everything you just described, which is like the process of friends is just something that men are really struggling with right now, much more so than women. And I think there's a couple of things going on here. One is we're revealing the extent to which a lot of that work was actually outsourced to women before.
Yeah, 100%. I've been in relationships many times in my life where the girlfriend or the wife had all the friends and had the network to go to make plans, especially around the holidays. You know, oftentimes you find yourself, especially if you're in a relationship with a woman, that she's going to be the one to make all the plans. She's going to have family or friends that she's going to set up the parties and or even the play dates, whatever it is. And as men, we tend not to really think about that too much when we're in a relationship. Not so much when you're single. I think a lot of times what happens is, especially when you're single, I know certainly for me, the last time I was single, I had built up friends and networks where I would hang out with them on a regular basis, and they became a part of my life. Doing things like jujitsu or people, especially jujitsu, because that's definitely a place where if you don't have friends as a man or a woman, you can definitely go to a jujitsu gym and sign up, or any martial arts place, but particularly jujitsu. And there's something about combat sports, rolling with a dude, that you guys are naturally just gonna start talking after you roll. You're gonna be hanging out by the wall, and it's just a natural thing to start shooting the shit. And next thing you know, over time, you just start making connections and friends. I got quite a few friends that I met through jujitsu. And those relationships were very strong up until, you get into a relationship. And a lot of times what happens is when you get into a relationship, you abandon those friendships for the new girlfriend. And women are really good about not doing that. They will maintain those networks. A lot of women I've dated in the past had friends from like way back. I mean, they had friends that went all the way back to grade school, even. Multiple girls that I've dated in my lifetime that had networks like that. And so a lot of men make the mistake of allowing their friends to fall off. They tend to make room for that girlfriend. I don't know if guys are just naturally needy like that, but it's definitely to their disadvantage, because what ends up happening, if that relationship ends up leaving down the line, you didn't take the time to solve it or maintain those friendships with your buddies. You just kind of, over time, you just kind of stop doing things that you would do as a single man. And then next thing you know, you got no friends. If the relationship ends, you got nothing to do on a Memorial Day or 4th of July or something.
Right. So if you're in a couple, how often are the social arrangements made by the women? They do a lot of that maintenance, the relationship maintenance, and the men free ride on the women. Right.
Exactly.
Every like weekend plan that's outside of my comfort zone. Pretty much most of them come from my partner.
All right. She's organized something.
She's an organizer. She wants to go try this thing.
Right. And you're
Let's
like,
go do vegan sushi roll.
I just want to play Far Cry 5. Or
I just want to lie on my back and watch Manchester United.
All right, fine. So I chose the wrong thing. But, yeah, no. So I think and women have been better at it, and men haven't had to do as much of it. So in some ways, I think we're being exposed a bit more, in the sense that women aren't doing as much of that work for us anymore. They're saying, look, I'm it's not my job to create your friendship network for you. So we're having to do it, and we're not very good at it. And we're certainly not very good at it yet. And I've had the same experience. I mean, I wrote a bit about loneliness, and I spoke at an event not that long afterwards, and I had a couple of young men, exactly the same as you, just come close and just say, I'm incredibly lonely.
A lot of times that happens too, because men tend to be laser focused on their work, their craft. Especially if you have a career, as a man, you're gonna be hardwired to just focus on that and have your blinders on, and you get very comfortable just being at your computer working or whatever it is that you do, and not concern yourself with making those friends. That's happened to me too.
And thank you for talking about this. And you end up hugging them, and and actually for me, I was talking to someone about this the other day. There's something about loneliness that just breaks my heart in a way that other forms of suffering don't. And I don't know why, but
loneliness as a man is very tough. I have in my life right now, I could see myself falling into a serious depression. But due to these networks that I've managed to build through church, through jiu-jitsu, through the workplace, even school. I have a couple of friends that I've spoken to this week that I know from when I was studying for the bar exam, that I met during those what they call bar review, or even law school. And having those these people in my life that I can reach out to is vital for not allowing yourself to fall into a severe depression, because that's exactly what's going to happen. Not only that, but I have a child. And if you're a man, you don't have any children, that's even double hard. Or if you have children and for whatever reason the mother doesn't allow you to see your child, which happens with a lot of guys, they end up getting screwed out of child custody and things like that. If you don't have that purpose in your life, you're going to suffer. I have a daughter, she's 10, and I have her 50-50 with the mom. And so I spend a lot of time, half of my life, raising a young girl, a young daughter. And I was thinking just the other day, man, I'm so grateful for that, because without her, there would be this huge void. And I'm in a time in my life where I'm not concerned about women. I'm more concerned about building this channel. I just started an auto detailing business, so I'm concerned with building my auto detailing business. Plus, I have a job, and I have another business that I don't do much with, but I have these things going on in my life. But the friends that I've built along the way have really saved me, because otherwise I'd be in a real bad place right now if I didn't have good friends that care about me, that call me on a regular basis, and we talk on a regular basis. That I could seriously see myself suffering, because there are moments when I do suffer uh, from loneliness. That's a real problem for a lot of men. Absolutely.
I hear about someone that's really lonely. My mom was talking about this guy who she ran into him, and he was going to this supermarket, and he was in front of her, in the queue, and she's like, "No, I'll go after you." He's like, "No, you go first." And he says, "I'm on my own." And actually, the hours after dinner, especially in the summer, they're the hardest. So I always come down here to the supermarket, and I buy a couple of things, and then come back and have a chat, and it fills my time. And my mum, because she's like a massive, she's like a social worker to the world, she ends up chatting to him and getting his phone number. But actually, that just pierced my heart. And so when you hear about these men, young, old, women, who are lonely, I think it's huge. And so and back to our earlier bit of the conversation too, is like those institutions that maybe used to kind of connect you to other people, right? Where do you make friends? And
yes, exactly. Where do you make friends? I've named off a couple, especially for men. It seems like it's a lot easier for women, because they generally have the kids, and the parents, when they want to set up play dates or sports and stuff like that, the moms tend to take care of that kind of thing. But if you have a kid, for one thing, you can get involved with the school, with the sports, take a more active role, being a coach. I've made friends where I coach my daughter's basketball team or the soccer team, and I make friends with the other parents. It's not as easy to make those connections where you're going to set up play dates with the mom, or because when I was coaching the teams, it was mostly the moms. It was all moms that would bring their kids to the practice, and there was a couple of dads. Unfortunately, I didn't make connections with those guys. It would have been great, but figuring out where you can go to make friends, it really takes an effort. As a man, you really got to make an effort and go out there, and you got to just put yourself out there. Especially the easiest place I would say is something like a jiu-jitsu gym or a boxing gym, somewhere where you're gonna be sweating and working and having a little bit of pain, getting punched in the face with somebody. That an MMA class, something about training with somebody just creates a bond between you and that person. I have a lot of acquaintances at jiu-jitsu, a lot of dudes that I know, and we're cool. A lot of them I only see there at the gym, but when I go there, man, that's where I get that contact, that community or fellowship with other dudes. And I tell you, man, if you feel lonely, or you feel like I don't know anybody, that's definitely a place that you can go and make friends. I mean, it's almost impossible not to make friends, because you're going to be one-on-one rolling with a dude, and it's fun. It's something that you can do for exercise, and not just for your physical health, but for your mental health. Matter of fact, I'm going to start getting more into jiu-jitsu. I just got, I'm hoping to get a position at a gym where I can coach a class. It's not about the money. It's not even a lot of money or anything like that. It's just being able to share your gift and be able to connect with people one-on-one or in a group setting. MMA or jiu-jitsu, man, is perfect. Another great place is church. I make so many friends at church, and we may not always hang out together, or hardly ever, or some people not at all. But man, I've made friends at church where I see them, they know my name, I know their name. We have long conversations. Today, a matter of fact, today I visited this weekend. I visited 3 churches, and I went to about 5 different services. So today, I went to church at the morning service where I see all the old folky, and then I went to mid-morning service where I see younger people, and I like it because they're different songs. The morning class is hymns. The later service has more modern Christian music. And then after that, I decided to go to a third service today because my buddies, another friend of a friend, a guy who I met at a men's conference yesterday, invited me to church today. So I just made a new friend, Dan. Shout out to Dan, where I went to his church, and then I met there my buddy who introduced me to that guy. His mother was there, so she ended up inviting me to breakfast, or more like lunch after church, and then two of her friends came along, and I ended up having lunch with three old folky, they're like in their 70s, but I was like considered the youngster. I'm 46, but I had lunch with these people, and I had a great time. And I remember sitting there thinking to myself, this is way better than just sitting by myself somewhere, moping and feeling bad for myself. It was truly amazing to be able to make new friends that way, and that's definitely how you do it. And one more way, before I let this continue, is if another great sport is pickleball. They got pickleball courts popping up everywhere. You just buy yourself a $10 racket and a 50-cent racquetball, and you go on down to the local parks where they have pickleball. Now, I live in Whittier, California. They have one in Whittier, California, but I actually like to go to the Montebello Park, because they have a bunch of people who play there on a regular basis. I know people's names. I forget names a lot, but I show up and like, hey, Andres, I haven't seen you in a while. And it's amazing. It's putting yourself out there. There's no good reason not to have friends. Why men have no real friends? Well, we have to take, as men, we got to take a look at ourselves. Are we putting ourselves out there? I really think that if you put yourself out there, there's no way you're not going to make friends. And if somebody doesn't want to be friends with you, then that's okay. That happens to me a lot at jiu-jitsu, at church, at pickleball. There's people who you're not always gonna jive with everybody, and some people you'll just be cool. Like I have a lot of guys at jiu-jitsu who are really good friends, and I have some that are just like, hey, what's up? And that's it. I never say anything to them. But the key here is you got to put yourself out there and find places to make friends. Let's see if these guys have suggestions of their own. It sounds like they're about to start talking about that.
You just said at work, right? And so I think our colleagues in some ways become our friends, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not saying it is a bad thing, but it's different to the friends you've made at church or through your sports or through, do you know what I mean, or wherever. And so the other thing I'll say about this is, have you heard of the men's sheds movement?
I don't know what a men's sheds is, but I've heard of male groups and stuff emerging.
Yes, there's a lot of male groups emerging. There's one which is the Australian government just funded this in Australia. It's called the men's sheds, and they're places where men go and fix stuff. Mm-hmm. Like you'll bring a lawnmower, right? Do stuff, right?
That's cool. I think we could all use something like that. I'm gonna see if my buddies want to do that, man, and we could bring our own gardening tools and just go garden in someone's house or something. That might be a little too much. Maybe not. Let's see.
And it's one of the things that I've really learned from this, and I wish I'd known more about it before. It's like, have you heard of this thing about men communicating more easily shoulder to shoulder than face to face? Have you come across this?
Yeah, I've heard about this. Yeah.
It's really interesting. So when my wife would sometimes, when her boys came home from school, she'd sit down directly opposite them, like across the breakfast bar type thing, right? And she'd sit directly opposite and give them protein. And then she'd be like, how's your day?
Yeah.
And like, oh, right. We'd be driving somewhere or watching soccer or playing a video game, like shoulder to shoulder. And they'd be like, yeah, it's a weird thing happened today with her or with me, right? So eventually I said, you've got to stop staring them in the face. That's not how men open up, right? And so
my buddy shared a jiu-jitsu meme with me yesterday, and it was two jiu-jitsu guys, and one of the guys had the back of the other guy. So, he's got seatbelt and with his hooks in, and they're just there. hugging each other. My friend said, or the meme said, it's only gay if you look each other in the eyes. It makes perfect sense with what this guy's saying.
The men's sheds movement is actually, I think, based on a profound insight, which is that men have to be doing something in order to be being with their friend.
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking to my buddy Justin the other day because we have a Tuesday night men's gather. We just get together as guys. It's like it's not a Bible study, but we just kind of hang out like at a Starbucks. There'll be like anywhere from 5 to 10 people. And I was telling him, yo, man, like, going and eating and hanging out, that's cool. Every once in a while, I like it's fine. Good, we talk, we're dudes, we're eating. But like, man, we should be doing some man stuff, going to the gym, working out as a group. Or he suggested going for a walk like in a park, but I was like, man, come on, let's make it a little more manly. Going to a shooting range. So we're planning on going to a shooting range together as a group. That's pretty cool. I think if you can get with your buddies and go to the gym, when you go to the gym, like a regular gym, you got to go with a buddy because it's really hard to make friends at the gym. Because people are working out, they're doing their sets. And, when's the last time you walked over to somebody and say, hey, brother, you need a spot? You need me to spot you? And try to make friends like that. I mean, that's just not natural. But if you have a group of friends, you guys, I was telling him it'd be a great idea to just go to the gym as a group. We all get a membership at the same place. And, my friend Greg and I, the last time we went to the gym, we had such a great workout. And there's something about working out with somebody, lifting weights, as opposed to working out by yourself. Because when I go by myself, I have like the weirdest, like very lazy workouts. Except for today and yesterday, I implemented something new because I go by myself. And I decided to start tracking what I do at the gym. So before I sit in my car and I write down what I'm going to do when I go in there. And then I go in there and I do it. That worked for me the last couple of days. But for the most part, when I work out by myself, it's very lazy. When I went with my buddy Greg, holy smack, man, I had such a great workout because we're there, we're talking, shooting the shit, we're getting our sets in, we're pushing each other. And that's definitely the way to go. Going solo to the gym's not really a good idea. Let's move on. Because this is like a 20-minute video.
Go into any coffee shop and count how many people are sitting there staring at each other for hours on end. Mostly women. Not saying right. And then go to fishing, road trips. It's the only explanation for golf. Do you play golf?
No.
Thank God. But like when a guy is saying, "Do you think I should use the 5-iron?"
Yeah, I
don't play golf either, right? But what he's really saying is, "I love you."
Yeah.
Or I'm lonely, or I need help. And so there is something to be said for like men, and even people have studied actually how men stand in relation to each other at like a party or something. When I've told you this, you won't be able to stop looking. Is that men actually are always at a bit of an angle, right? We just don't stand face to face. It spikes our threat cortisol or whatever.
I think men do say I love you, and we do in our own way, especially when we tease each other or tell gay jokes, or joke with each other. That's like I could see that. That's like a guy's way of saying I love you. Yeah, I totally understand that.
So we always stand a little bit of an angle, but also like doing something together requires us to be more shoulder to shoulder, which is why some psychotherapists now, they do walking talking therapy. They've realized that with men especially, like sitting them down and staring at them is less effective quite often than going for a walk.
You said that you think one of the biggest issues facing men today is the issue of suicide. And you talked about some of the stats at the top of this conversation that relate to men. The most startling of all, as being someone that lives most of the time in the UK, is that it's now the biggest killer of men under the age of 45. Have you been exposed to those stories, especially as you published this book, but in your own personal life, have you been exposed to those stories of the impact of suicide directly?
Yeah. People rarely talk about it in an open forum, but they will very often after. I had this moment recently, someone I'm actually working with, and I've been working with for some time. I did a little piece on Morning Joe, which is a daytime thing in the US. And I talked about this crisis of kind of male suicide. And she told me afterwards that they put up just a stat, the 4 times higher among men. It was just a graphic. And she said she burst into tears.
Yeah, I mean, suicide is definitely a problem for men. You see, men experience true loneliness, you know. Not to pick on women, but a woman might probably experiences loneliness as well, but it's different. Not like a man experiences loneliness. You know, a woman could pick up go on her dating apps or pick up the phone, and there'll be 100 people that'll break up that loneliness for her and take her out to dinner, and obviously, because they're trying to get in her pants or whatever. But women don't really suffer true loneliness. Not to say none do, but for the most part, no. A man, loneliness for a man, obviously, because it's just statistics clearly show that more, a significant more amount of men commit suicide. And the problem is that loneliness can really break you. It's kind of like when you put a man in the hole. In the prisons, when they put a man in solitary, they constitutionally you consider that cruel and unusual punishment, because it's cruel to be left alone for hours, or days, can cause you to suffer severe mental damage. It's like if you were stranded on an island with no contact. Remember the guy, Tom Hanks, Wilson, the soccer ball? I mean, that's the guy who lost his mind. You can lose your mind when you suffer severe loneliness. I wouldn't wish that on anybody, and I think that's probably the main reason why men kill themselves is despair, loneliness, loss of hope. Yeah, it's really bad.
And she said, I'm so grateful you're doing this work. I lost my son to suicide when he was 16. And started telling me kind of why. And I have worked with this woman for years on this issue. And she'd never raised it with me before. I had no idea. And I now understand why, particularly given her situation, she's been so supportive of my work. It wasn't just an intellectual thing. This is very rarely just an intellectual thing. It's usually visceral as well. There's usually something going on there. And I've had countless stories like that, people sharing their stories, and it's heartbreaking. And you've had people on this show who've talked quite a lot about this. Jordan Peterson was asked in an event once by this guy. He said, I'm thinking, I delayed my suicide to come and hear you talk. Why should I not take my own life? No, I haven't had anything like that. But
yeah, I don't know if you guys ever seen that clip where this guy, it was a Jordan Peterson. He wasn't the only one on the stage, but the guy screams out, he interrupts the whole event. And he's like, I need help. I need help. I wonder if I could find that. Let me see here. Give me a second. I'd really like to find that clip. That was see if I can find it for you guys. It won't take long. Bear with me. Let's see if it pops up here. I don't want to take up too much time. Okay. All right. So let me see if I could. Let me stop that. Share screen. Boom, boom, boom. Bam, bam, bam. Bam, bam, bam. Let's add that. All right. So let's check this out.
Speaking forcefully, let's say, or perhaps even somewhat angrily by the end, was because not only was the white noise generator
My name is David Lee Laushu. I'm unwell. I need help. I need help. I just wanted to meet you. I'm unwell. I called 911.
I hope that you,
Get up there.
I hope that you find the help that you need.
I want to know him better.
Look at this man break down. I mean, there's absolutely, nothing funny about that at all. I mean, this poor man just broke down crying probably because, he's got nobody in his life. He's just a man who's experiencing severe loneliness. And I just can't imagine what that poor guy was going through. But you could see just how broken that dude was. I mean, he was so desperate. I'll be honest with you, when I watched that dude, like I the first time I watched it, I came to tears. And then just right now, watching that arousing emotion in me, where I had extreme sympathy for him. And because as a man, I'm just 1 degree away from that. And I think there's a lot of men out there who are just 1 degree away from being that guy. And it's a scary thought to think that you could lose it all. You could go through a breakup, an unintentional breakup where you're broken up with, and you lose everything. You lose the life that you had. You lose the wife, the kids. Your everything just comes crashing down. It's taken from you, and as a man, you could, if you don't have any support networks, man, you end up just like that. That's very sad.
It's there. This crisis is there in our communities playing out.
Is there I'm just thinking about that woman who's been working with you, supporting your work, but hadn't said anything. And I'm wondering why people don't say something about it when it happens in their family. With other deaths, with a cancer death, you'll see a Facebook post, you'll see a whatever, you'll see, but it seems, I'm wondering here if there's a different level of, I don't know, public sharing as it relates to suicide, because it's a different type of death, isn't it? It's one that creates a lot of guilt and feelings
and shame. And so you're in her situation. And I have to tell you, having raised boys, one of whom in particular who really struggled with his mental health through teen years, there are days where you just hope as a parent that they're still around. And you think,
yeah, as a parent myself, my son's in the Navy now. I'm a Navy dad. See that? I got my Navy dad sweater. Before my son went into the Navy, he's very depressed. Hanging around with his knucklehead friends, and I don't want to say too much about that, but I was very concerned for him. Sleeping a lot, very depressed. By the grace of God, he was able to get into the Navy, and he's doing a lot better, and I praise God for that. But as a parent, it hurts. I mean, it hurts to see your child suffer. Like I can't imagine a parent who had a child who's going through cancer. I seen one of those commercials with the dad, talking about how he's the pain. He's not focused on himself, but the pain he's going through watching his child suffer, knowing he can't do anything about it. When you see your child suffering from depression or loneliness, that's really tough as a parent to have to deal with, or to see your child like that.
Think what it was. And actually, at 16, and we've seen a huge rise in young men's suicides in the US, especially. And Just think, if you're a parent and you lose a child to suicide, the idea that you cannot free yourself of the burden of what could I have done? What did I miss? Was it me? Right? Being a parent is already a lifelong trip in rethinking your decisions, right? And you add that to the mix.
Yeah, and think about the disadvantages you have as a parent. Most parents got to be out there working one full-time, sometimes 2 jobs. They got to put food on the table. If you're in a single parent household, or if you share 50-50, which most parents do, you know, imagine trying to keep tabs on your child while you're out working. You know, that's it's tough.
I can't imagine it. I mean, my parents lost a daughter very young to a heart defect, and they have an amazing marriage and they've been amazing parents. But I do think that the loss to this illness, this terrible tragedy thing, it's just different. It's hugely grief, but it doesn't turn them, like, it turns the mirror on you. It's like, was this you? Was this your fault? Are you the reason your son is dead? I mean, what that kind of does to people. And so because of that, people don't talk about it. So you'll get died unexpectedly.
Yeah.
We're not willing to talk about it in the same way as we are others, because we think it might reflect on us in some way, perhaps, or on the memory of that person.
Or them, yeah.
I mean, it's still a crime, technically.
Oh, is it?
Now, people say, it's a really interesting thing. I've really learned not to say commit suicide.
Yeah. Died by suicide.
Died by suicide.
I just wanted to...
A lot of parents, I knew a guy that we suspected that he had committed suicide. He wasn't a close friend or anything. It was many years ago. But and this has been a couple of times, this type of thing where young men had took their own lives. Supposedly. I don't know for certain. But one thing I noticed is that parents, especially when parents lose a child to suicide, will not talk about, they're not going to say that. They might even make up a story about what happened, because there's always 2 conflicting stories. There's people saying, well, they said it's this, but I think it's this. I think they took their own life. It's not something you're going to just talk about.
Because I've got some crazy unthinkable stats here that I wanted to just add on top of what you were saying, which come from the Institute of Boys and Men report. That really was staggering to me, is that a man dies by suicide approximately every 13 minutes.
In the US, yes.
In the United States alone.
Every 13 minutes. Every 13 minutes, a man or boy kills himself. I mean, that's insane. That means that as I've been making this video, which has been 40 minutes now, it's like 4 dudes have killed themselves. That's insane. I mean, that's nuts.
Alone. So that's not including other countries and the UK.
Just the US.
Okay. If men's suicide rates had matched those of women's, approximately 545,000 fewer men would have died since 1999. And that's again just in the US.
Just US. 500,000 men, yeah.
Suicide rates amongst younger men have grown the fastest. The growth of male suicides has occurred almost entirely since the beginning of 2010s.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly as well, rural countries in the USA have higher rates of suicide than those in urban metros. So it highlights again that suicidality is geographically distributed in certain ways. Why? What's going on here? What's going on with this full picture? Why is this the state of suicide amongst men?
In some ways, the decision to end your own life, obviously it's complex and it varies, but in some ways it's like the ultimate signal that you don't feel as if the world is better off with you than without you. Like, so many people who take their own lives, lose their lives to suicide, will say something like, you'll be better off without me. I've been a burden to you. I know I've been difficult. They convince themselves that they're not wanted, they're not needed. In some ways, that goes back to, like, Arthur Miller's play Death of a Salesman. Willie Loman takes his own life because he thinks that the life insurance his family will get will be a better breadwinner than he can be, because he's so badly failed in his primary responsibility as a breadwinner. So it's not a new idea, but there's a really nice piece of work by Fiona Shand. She's an Australian researcher, and the work was done primarily in Australia, where they looked at the words that men who did take their own lives used to describe themselves before doing so, or in some cases attempting to. But usually when men attempt suicide, they do lose their lives. And the two most commonly used words by those men who took their own
useless. I bet you it's useless or worthless. Something to that effect.
Lives were about themselves, were useless.
Told you.
Worthless.
I told you.
Now, of course, this is an example of people who then went on to take their own lives, but it's nonetheless, I think, very powerful statement that to get to that stage, you don't think you have worth. You don't think you have.
Especially if the people in your life make that known to you on a regular basis. You know, women especially don't realize how their words can cut deep to like their husbands or boyfriends. You know, their boyfriend or husbands are out there doing the best they can, hopefully, and the girlfriend or the wife will be unappreciative or chop that man down. You know, what man hasn't heard the words, well, somebody's got to be the man around here? And some guys may actually feel that they're useless and not being able to cut it as a man. I mean, if you can't be a man or support your family, if you're struggling to find work or something like that, you know, and you're thinking to yourself, you know what, I'm better off just taking my own life so that at least my family would have that insurance money. Like, wow.
Have use. You don't think you're needed. And I believe that the most fatal place to end up in as a human being is to feel unneeded.
Absolutely.
I think to be needed is arguably the most important and constant human requirement. And so if you end up feeling like I'm not needed, my family don't need me, my employer doesn't need me, my community doesn't need me, I am surplus to requirements. If anything, I'm a drag on my parents or on my community. I'm not adding value, however you define value, to the people around me. I'm taking away from it. That's the psychological trajectory that seems to put a lot of men towards this path. And well short of suicide, I think many of the other mental health problems we see among men, addiction, checking out in one way or another, coming out of the labor market, etc., they're not the most extreme form, of course, of checking out by literally taking your own life, but they are a different form of that. They are a different way of kind of benching yourself, taking yourself out of the equation.
Yeah. Something I want to talk about probably on my next show is men who suffered from alcoholism or drug use in order to avoid dealing with the underlying issues, avoid, there's things that happen with men where they're falling short and they will turn to the alcohol or the drugs. I've certainly done that in the past, growing up, turning to alcohol or just to numb the pain. And a lot of times that pain could be the sting of failure, the feeling like you failed and messed up your whole life. I remember being a very young man, 20, and thinking that my whole life was over. I screwed it all up because I dropped out of high school, and that my life was over and I was never going to be able to turn it around. And just the despair that I felt, thinking that I was a loser. I've never actually said that out loud, but I must have felt. That's clearly how I felt. And I compounded the problem by just continuing to drink alcohol and drugs. And then the alcohol and drugs on some days would numb the pain so much I would forget about all the problems I had, or I would forget about the fact that I had failed as a father, or failed as a student, or failed as a son. All these different things, all these different failures, that there was absolutely no reason for me to feel that way. I was 20 years old. And one of the biggest problems was that I was growing up without mentorship. I was growing up without a man to model. So I ended up modeling bad behavior from other men who were just as screwed up as I was, or other men my age who were just as screwed up as I was. That's something that I also want to talk about on another show, is mentorship. How to find mentorship, or how to, be around other men who can, not necessarily have to guide you, but men that you can talk to that can steer you in the right direction. Because handling your problems on our own is not always the best. It's not usually the right idea. It's not usually going to get us out of the rut that we're in. So that's definitely something I want to do. I want to talk about. I have a show coming up. I want to talk about alcoholism. And another show I want to talk about, the men who grew up without positive male role models, maybe their dad or something, or maybe you had a dad but he just wasn't involved. All those things affect men in a serious way, in a significant way. And when men are affected like that, it affects society. All of society suffers, even if people don't see it. Society does suffer when men are not at their best. When we don't have strong men in our communities, the whole community suffers. So I definitely want to talk about those things. Thank you. If you tuned in for the entire show, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Drop a like and a subscribe, and make a comment. Maybe put up, if you have questions or anything like that, I could bring it up on my next video. Or if you have topics that you'd like me to cover. This is my first reaction video, so I'm not accustomed to doing reaction videos. The funny thing, I actually, for the last 5 years, I bought my podcast machine in 2025. I'm sorry, 2020, right during the pandemic when it started, because everybody was forced to stay home. So I bought the podcast machine and everything, and for the longest time, I was trying to figure out how to do reaction videos, just like I'm doing right now. And I mean, I really suffered. It took me 5 years to figure out, oh, you need software. There was just no one for me to ask, or if there was, I asked a couple of guys that I probably knew, and they gave me some weird advice that wasn't right. It was just, I needed a certain software that I purchased. And now I'm able to do reaction videos. So I'm really looking forward to doing a lot of these. I'm going to try to do one a couple times a week or whatever. And if you have any words of encouragement or constructive criticism, please go ahead and do that in the comment section. And you are watching the Dre B. Rambo Show. I had a show, the same show before. I stopped doing the show. There were some issues that I was going through, and I stopped doing the show, but I'm back now and getting it together. And we're going to build this channel, help as many dudes as we can, help myself in the process. It's actually quite therapeutic talking into the camera and talking to you folks. And over time, I like to have a community here. I know there's a guy I like to watch. He does really cool videos. Our styles are totally different, although I enjoy what he's doing. But he does have, I forget what he calls them, but they're basically like an alternate channel or chat rooms where they talk and things like that. I guess you could join or whatever. So anyway, that is the end of the Dre B. Rambo Show. I'm not sure if this music is going to be playing when I push the button, but it'll be interesting to hear if it's playing, because I can't hear it on my earphones because I have to put it through the computer. But thank you for watching the Dre B. Rambo Show. I'll catch you guys on the flip side. Make sure you guys do something positive. God bless you all. Talk to you later.